Good morning, you guys. Welcome to the Shay Show. My name is Shay. Today we're going to speak with Marcie Walker. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She, again, is another brilliant soul that I've met here on the gram. She's someone who really dives into the intersectionality of race, of sex, of what it means to be a Black person in America, and navigating that space most creatively. She calls herself Black Coffee with White Friends. She really has, when I look at her feed, I see someone who's having really bold conversations that is drenched in love, compassion, and understanding, but also her foot is on the ground. I will not back down, nor will I allow my voice to be quelched and be told that it doesn't have meaning and value. That is what I see in her, and she's encouraged me greatly. So let me go see. This is kind of new for her. Got my little blanket on because it's a little chilly here in the Carolinas. Let me go see where she is. Okay. Let's see. Hey, Katie. Let me see. This is, she's new to this space. So let me go see if, let's go see, maybe how do I, I almost stopped. There she is. There she is. There she is. I'm going to go get her. Marcie. Oh my God, I'm so excited. You guys, I'm fangirling over here. Hey!
I was making tea. I'm so sorry. I don't even have a good excuse.
No, you take your time. You can make tea. I mean, you look lovely. Sorry that I look like I just kind of worked out because I kind of just did. So I'm like trying to
you look gorgeous, by the way.
I'm like, okay, get the sweat, get the grease, and then act like you're together.
Gorgeous. Are you kidding me? But
Marcie,
thanks for inviting me.
Oh my God, thank you for saying yes. And thank you for showing up in this space with little old me.
Oh my gosh, stop. I'm a little old me too. We're all little old me.
We sure are. I was telling everybody that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you in person yet. But what I did see on your feed and in your Patreon, and I just wanted to take a moment to talk about it. What I saw was you having such bold and transparent conversations about the intersectionality of race, of sex, of Christianity, of what it means to be Black in America, what your experiences are. And you have had these conversations that are hard, but you have done it with so much aplomb, so much love, so much compassion, so much understanding. And the final thing I said, though, is her foot is on the ground and she will not be quelched, nor will she be told that her voice doesn't matter or that her thought process and her feelings are invalid. And when I saw that, I was like, sister, I need to talk to you.
Thank you. You know, I wasn't always this way. I think I kind of, for a long time, thought that race was pretty much solved, or at least not the problem of anyone but me personally. Like,
what made you change that?
My daughter went to she was bullied in school. When we moved to Texas, she was bullied in her elementary school for being smart and being good. And I had to make a choice, like, okay, well, how do I answer that?
Was she in a largely white environment? It was
a largely white, but there was diversity. There were Pan-Asian families, and there were Mexican and Latino families. So there was a lot of there were a handful of gay families. So that school had a bit of diversity, and it was no less diverse than the school we were in Chicago. So it was never about her Blackness.
It was her smartness.
The first thing that I asked when she told us, she was in 4th grade, and she told us my husband and I that she was being bullied,
What did the
she
bullying
was
look like?
shocked that I even thought that someone would come after her blackness. She had never experienced anything like that, and it was really surprised. She couldn't believe I said that. But what it was is I had to make a decision, because it's that fourth and fifth grade is when kids kind of decide for you who you're going to be. If you're going to be the popular kid, if you're going to be this. And I was like, and although the school was like, we'll do all this stuff to protect her.
Yeah.
And then also they said to me, and it'll make her stronger. And I was like, no, if this were a work situation and a coworker were bullying me,
HR would be called in.
HR would be called in, that person would be fired.
That's
but we
exactly
can't do that in schools, right?
Right.
So I was like, what am I going to do? And I really felt like I don't want her to ever think it's not worth it for her to be her fully amazing self. I never want her to show up and feel like, well, I can't answer the question that I know, or I can't like science, or I can't love reading, or I can't be a kid that just wants to do what the teacher says and I don't want to cause trouble. I didn't want her to feel that she had to trade friendship and companionship for her integrity. Yeah. So I decided to homeschool her for a year. Oh, and it was a hot mess.
I'm not worthy.
I did it for 1 year, y'all. It was a hot mess. I majored in English literature, so we just read some books.
Right. It was like science, what? Math.
Every science thing that we did was a field trip, but it wasn't like a real field trip. It was just something I wanted to do. Let's go to the botanical gardens. That's science.
It's science. Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis raises those plants out of the ground. Glory.
And so I thought, we did no math. We read The Hobbit. We read To Kill a Mockingbird. We read, Where the Red Fern Grows. We read a lot
in that, and Where the Red Fern Grows. There's some counting.
Yeah, and then we started doing Black history, because I also was like, you know what? No one's teaching this child her history, so we started reading Black folk tales, African folk tales, and we started doing a lot of things like that. And then I was looking for a school, and I found this school that I also put her in American Heritage Girls, so she could be with other girls and earn badges.
I don't know American Heritage Girls. What is that?
Oh, okay. So it's not good. Not terrible. But basically, American Heritage Girls are what Girl Scouts used to be the Boy Scouts. So when the Girl Scouts started to become more feminist and pro-womanhood, womanist, and they started to, the girls started to talk about sexual identity and things like that.
Was that bad?
Yes, because they thought it was bad. Now, so they broke off. So the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts of America they are not
the same thing.
The same thing anymore. They're not.
But don't the Boy Scouts talk about what it means to be a man? Why is it bad for the girls to talk about the beauty and the strength of being a woman? I don't get it.
Well, because it had to be under that Christian patriarchy idea of what a woman is.
Oh, okay.
And they weren't following that mold.
Okay.
And so what ended up happening is American Heritage Girls was created. And there was this beautiful woman who was running it. And my daughter did very well with American Heritage Girls. But, she was one of two Black girls there, and I was the only Black mom. So it was one of those things where, again, the other Black child is being raised by a white parent, which is fine and lovely.
Right, I get it, but it's not the same thing.
She's having a different experience than my daughter's having, and the parents are treating the parenting differently. Yeah, from their own experiences, right? Right.
Because they don't have your experiences.
Right, and I also felt sometimes that white mother parenting the Black child was more of a real parent than me parenting my Black child as a Black person. Like somehow I was less equipped as a parent.
Who did you feel that from? Can you?
I felt that often from parents, period. No, I didn't feel that from the actual adopted moms. I really got along with them. And if anything, we were exchanging information. So
because they want to know how to do her hair.
Yeah, we could talk hair, we could talk lotions, we could talk about things.
The butters.
And we could talk about this happened to my child.
Yeah.
You know, and so we were having this whole different thing. But the women who weren't those parents, the parents who did not have children of color, you know, if they had a question about a child of color and I said something about race, they had to check it with the white mom who also had a child of color.
So you already answered my question. My question was going to be, how did that manifest itself in undermining the validity of you parenting? Because they would fact check you.
They would fact check me. And so, you know, and then not realizing that we have different experiences. This in and of itself is a different experience.
Right.
And what you might say to me, you might not say to that mom.
That's right.
Right. So
it's true.
Yeah. So, but that American Heritage Girl Troop was part of a small Christian university model classical education school. And I loved the way, the freedom that these kids were free to learn, and learning was great, and they celebrated learning. And I thought I want my daughter to have a little bit of that.
Yeah.
So we put her in this school, and I still was not awake to what it would mean for her to go from having some diversity in the classroom to absolutely none. And so that's what happened. She was the only Black child in all of her classes. She was the only Black girl in her grade. She was the only Black girl in the when she moved to middle school, she was the only Black girl in that middle school, and there was one Black boy, and he had a white mom.
Right.
You
so
know,
it's still different.
And so there was, and she and I got along like a house on fire. But
it's not even about getting along, is it? It's just different experiences.
Different experiences.
She's never been presented in the world as a Black woman.
Right.
She's been presented in the world as a white woman. And so therefore the experiences and the things that she even recognizes or sees are different than yours. Like your daughter was aghast. That you even thought that there was something about race when you heard that she was being bullied. That was a strange thought to your daughter, because up until that point, she hadn't had any experience to the contrary.
She hadn't had the experience. So we put her in the school. We took her out of that school where she's being bullied. I homeschooled her, did terrible, put her in this private school that was part of the time she was at school and part of the time she was home with me. And so because I loved having her home. So I was like, well, that's cool. And again, not realizing that, well, how many people can do that? Not a lot of people can afford to have a parent who's dedicated to staying home.
It's true.
And I was fortunate enough to have that. I was fortunate enough to have this life where we could make the compromise. We made compromise. We didn't buy a house. We didn't, we rented. We did things so that I could be home and we can make this transition, not just from into a Texas culture, because she came from a city.
Chicago.
She came from Chicago, and we're back in Chicago, but she was a Chicago kid. She was used to seeing a lot more of her in her around on a daily basis. And so when we got to school, I suddenly was in this very gated community of affluence, Christian white affluence.
Yeah.
And we were, and it was going along, but I noticed that she wasn't making a lot of friends. And I thought, well, maybe it's just because these kids have been going to school together for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
and they're just comfortable with each other, and they're just not comfortable with her yet. She'll get there, you know. And,
Right. Because at this point, you're still at this space where you're like, I don't think race is an issue anymore.
Yeah, I'm not thinking it's race. And I thought, and I was really open about being there. I was like, I cannot believe that my child is learning Latin. Let me tell y'all, I'm like saying this in meetings. I'm like, let me tell y'all, my granddaddy could not read or write, and my daughter is learning Latin, and this is amazing. And
this is amazing. Let's just pause on that. What's granddaddy's name?
His name was Papa. I don't even really know the man's name.
You know what? I pause real quick. No. Here's something that I want people to hear, because there will be a lot of people who will watch this. Most of my shows are watched in the saving and review. So I often tell my white friends, which I want to get to the name of your everything. I often tell my white friends that, you know, it starts to break apart. Our historical knowledge of who we are starts to break apart. The average Black person of the African diaspora, that I'm from the Bahamas, whether it's in the Bahamas, whether it's Jamaica, United States of America, it starts to break apart at the grandparent level. You are extra special if you know who your great grandparents are. Most Black people of the African diaspora don't know further back than grandparents.
Right.
And so it's actually not uncommon that you know him as Papa. And what Papa's name was, who knows? His name was Papa, because our history wasn't considered important enough to write down, to carry. And that's why I was just teaching my daughter and my friend what a griot is. And that we are the ones who carry the story.
I think his name might have been Johnny, because my mom called him Daddy Johnny. I think.
Daddy Johnny. Which, okay, so we're going to say his name is Johnny. Somebody says his name was Johnny.
Yay, my sister! Yay!
Yes, good. Do you know his surname? Do you know what his surname was?
Oh, yeah. Jones. They were Jones.
Johnny
Jones.
Jones.
I'm having this different experience, and I'm also used to being, my sister being here, I was raised in an all-white community, but I had my sisters, and I had cousins, and I had my nephews, and I had a big family.
Did you have racially charged experiences in your childhood?
Oh, absolutely. But the difference was when I came home, and my weekends and my holidays were just filled with family, people who look like me. So I knew that those people didn't know what they were talking about.
Right.
I knew my words. My family made sure I knew my words.
I have a theory about that. I have a theory that we should not allow our children to be around people who do not value them until their value is intact. Because the truth is, we will all go out into the world and we'll be around tons of people who don't value us.
Exactly.
And that's going to happen. But I think that it should not happen until their sense of worth and value is fully ensconced in their entire being, because it's unsafe. Because I look back, and when I was 7 years old and I first came to the United States to go to school, that's the first time I was called nigger. I didn't know what the word meant.
Yes.
All I knew was it wasn't good because how their faces looked when they called me nigger. And then it took me, childhood memory. It could have been a day or a week. Then it took me some time to figure out what this nigger was predicated upon. And at one point, I remember sitting in class and going, I'm the only brown person in this class. I think it has something to do with this. I think.
Wow.
And so
it just breaks my heart.
It breaks my heart.
It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart.
It does too. It breaks my heart. So, but why am I telling you this? Is that I was around teachers, adults, and I remember running to an adult and saying, this kid, he called me nigger and he pushed me off of the monkey bars. Yeah. And she now, in my mind as an adult, I realized she was the adult prefect on the playground.
Right.
And she said to me, sticks and stones. It's just a word. Go.
Yeah.
What I don't remember is anybody tending to my bloody eye. What I don't remember is anybody holding space for where my emotional little heart was broken. And so what I'm saying is, these people shouldn't have been allowed to be around me.
I know.
They shouldn't
I
have,
know.
because I did not have a clear, powerful knowledge of how beautiful, of how smart, of how amazing I was. And so I was in a very fragile place around these very, very cruel adults.
And you know, and the thing about it, I just received a DM and it kind of broke my heart. It was a mom who received, she'd just gotten an email about how prepping her and all the parents about teaching To Kill a Mockingbird and how they were telling them, you know, that it's an important book and on and on and on, and why they were going to be using the N-word. And I was like, and she was concerned because her son was going to be the only brown person in that class. And I was like, there's so many other books.
Right.
I don't have a problem with the book To Kill a Mockingbird.
Not at all.
I just don't think it needs to be taught personally. And the reason why is because if you can't, if you are assuming that every single person in that class is anti-racist.
Right.
And that their parents are anti-racist and that they have been taught and schooled on how to critically look at racism.
And they haven't. They have not.
And then you're assuming that the teacher has had that she's, you know.
And he or she probably has not either.
And she has not either. And the only person in that, and you're assuming that the child has parents who are going to be able to support that word being read by their classmates. And that the kids are not going to use that word once they're outside of the classroom.
And that the kid is not going to feel, I remember reading those types of books in largely white environments, and where I'm like the only chocolate chip in the room. And I remember I was talking to my husband about it the other day. I learned what that feeling is that comes up the back of your neck, where you're just so embarrassed and you want to become invisible. I learned what that feeling was immediately when I was about 7 years old, because I remember feeling whenever the word nigger or whatever Black people were being spoken of, were not being spoken of in high. I remember feeling all eyes on me. And you know what I also remember feeling like already? I had to act as if it wasn't about act normal, act straight. Straight as an arrow, Shay. Act like your skin is not being pierced. Act like your heart is not hurting. Why did I had to try to do that at 7 years old? I tried to act like it meant nothing. I was unfazed, although phased I was.
Exactly. And the thing about it is that someone just asked, what can we do to get this book out of schools? I don't think we have to get the book out of schools. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if that book is going to be taught, it can't just be taught in isolation. That it can be taught, if you have a reading group after school that's going after anti-racism and you're reading To Kill a Mockingbird, but you're also doing Stamped from the Beginning, or you're also doing How to Be an Anti-Racist. And there are young adult editions of those books. And you're studying all these things, and you're also going to throw in The Bluest Eye. You're going to throw in some Toni Morrison.
That's the part, though. That's the part. That correlating part of having Black authorship talk about Blackness.
So if you're going to teach To Kill a Mockingbird, it should not be your only thing that you're teaching.
Amen.
And that's what I think. But and you know,
and the reason why I would like to actually ask you this question: why do you think there's a reticence to change maybe how we interact, or the books that we put on our syllabi? Why do you think there is a reticence to change that? To change the materials, to change the books? Because I know that there are people who take it as an affront. Now they want to take away Kill a Mockingbird. Now they want to take away this, Mark Twain. Cancel culture. Why do you think there's a reticence to even say, can we just pause and hear how maybe other people feel when this is being read out loud in this young mind's standpoint? Why do you think there's a reticence?
I think people just, It's an old shoe. And it doesn't matter that the sole's worn out and there's holes in it. It's your old, familiar, comfortable shoe.
Yes.
It's that old ratty sweater that's, you know, people keep telling you, get yourself a new sweater, and you just, oh, I love this sweater. I know the pocket's got a hole in it, and I know the collar's falling off, but it's my old comfortable
but you know
sweater. And I think also it would require so much more.
Won't
and
it
so,
though?
But my thing is, yes, it will require so much more, but you're going to get so much more. You're going to get so much more
I love you.
beauty out of this. And you're going to start to see a narrative in all your stories. So I believe that you can teach about race. You can teach children about race and diversity and difference without starting at a very young age, so that by the time they get to high school, they already have a taste for diversity. It's expected. Mm-hmm. So when you're reading Winnie the Pooh, it is really a great idea to talk about intersectionality in Winnie the Pooh, because there's a lot of it in there. There's a lot of, Eeyore's different, but he's different in a very different way than all the other differences.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And to start there, or if you're going to talk about the Lord of the Rings, which I love talking about, let's talk about what the hobbits represent, what the orcs represent,
big-toed people.
Humanity, in our humanity. Because then when we start to talk about race, we can say, well, there's this, we can understand that there is evil,
right,
and how pervasive it is,
and how it wants to come against and break down anything that is perceived as different. Then that thought process is not a unique thought process, nor is it a unique action. You've seen it before. You saw it in Winnie the Pooh.
Right.
You saw it. Yeah.
You saw it in the Lord of the Rings. You see it in Star Wars. You see it in all.
You saw it in Lord of the Flies.
You saw it in Lord of the Flies.
Oh my God!
So there are great books that we can talk about. Where all the way along, we can talk about it with Fahrenheit 451. What it means to ban speech and literature, right? Because we have that now. We had a president who really was trying to take some things away from us. Like, what is it when the government decides who gets to read what, and what you get to watch and what you don't get to watch, right?
Right.
And that there's this policing of words. That's all very valid stuff to talk about. But if you're not talking about those things, then you just want to jump into one part of our history, a very broad history, one part. And a lot of times people are just like, I actually have heard people say, are there any classic Black books? And I'm just like, oh, my word, are you serious?
That also shows you what we value and what we promote, right? So it's kind of like that interview that I think we all have seen now of Toni Morrison and the young reporter. She's a British white lady, and she goes, so when are you going to have more non-Black characters, more white characters?
Yeah.
And she was like, Toni Morrison, bless her beautiful, brilliant soul. She sat there and she goes, you don't even know how offensive, ignorant, and racist your question is.
Yeah.
You're not asking white authors, when are they going to write more about Black people or Native Americans or indigenous people? You're asking me this because the base assumption is that we need to be discoursing about white people.
Right, because no one ever went to John Wayne and said, when are you going to get off that plane?
Right.
Talking about cowboys.
Right.
To riding horses. Right. And no one has gone to Martin Scorsese and said, enough with the gangsters. We don't want to hear you talking about Italians anymore.
Right.
But we often get that when we want to tell our stories.
Right.
That somehow there's some limit or threshold that, we've had enough.
Haven't we?
So
haven't we had enough of this?
And we haven't even begun. And it's really sad. And I would like to say this too. We get to make bad things too. We get to also, everything that we make doesn't have to be excellent. We get to make things that are terrible and awful and offensive, just like every other person. It's not just only white frat boys who get to make awful choices.
Decisions. Right.
But our kids need to be able to make awful decisions and choices.
And still be caught. And still be caught.
And still live.
Thank you. You know, it's that Chris Rock joke from probably back in the 90s. He was like, we will know racial equality has taken place when Black people are able to be just as average.
Yes.
As white people.
Average. Just as average.
We do have average Black people. And you shouldn't have to be excellent to be invited into the room or to the table. Exactly.
I agree. Absolutely.
There was something on it was on MSNBC I can't remember. It was like an anthropologist, a current anthropologist had taken, had called all of the people who had been invited to be guests, experts, and speakers on CNN, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, and of all of the people who had asked to be guest speakers, and I can't remember the exact article, so the numbers are off. I'm making up numbers at this point, but 100 experts were asked to come speak on these various news platforms on their particular topic. Of the 100, 5 of them were Black. Of the 5 that were Black, all of them had PhDs or multiple graduate degrees. Of the 95 that were white, it was something like only 20% of them even had an undergraduate degree.
Wow.
It was like we had to be like doctor, bishop, blah, 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 to be on the show, to speak to the thing. And they could have been just someone who had become an expert, not discrediting their expertise, but had become an expert through the living of the thing, through the learning of the thing, which is a powerful way to learn and know.
Right.
But I just thought, there's that threshold again.
Right.
So taking me back to my original question, at what point does it start to go, race isn't something of the past?
I'm trying to, can I get my,
yes, get it.
That's the red one. For me, it was when I learned that my daughter's school was going to do slave debates.
What does that mean? Like whether for it or against it?
They were going to have to argue for and against it.
Oh.
And I was kind of
How old is your daughter at this point?
She was going to be a freshman. She was a freshman, and we were at a meeting telling us what to expect for high school, and they were saying, well, their junior year, they split into the groups and they argue pro and against, and they do both sides of slavery. And I thought, are you, what?
Again, to your point, you're assuming that that everybody's an anti-racist.
Well, actually, when I talked to the teacher about it, she was like, I never taught the class with a Black student in it. She had never thought about it because she had never had to. And that is something that if you're a teacher out there and you're listening and you're wondering, should I teach this this way? Is this a good project for all my students? Whatever you're worried about, if you're worried about a disabled student, if you're worried about a Chinese American student, if you're worried about English as a second language student, a Black student, gay student, imagine that every single student in that classroom is that student, and their parents are that as well. Because if she would have imagined,
oh my God,
that every kid was Black in her classroom, and that Frederick Douglass was their granddaddy.
Right. And their mother was Maya.
And Maya Angelou was, auntie. She would have never thought that that was okay. But that's the thing. I realized that my white fellow moms and the teachers and friends that I made were having an entirely different school experience than I was having. And that there were things that happened in classrooms that just wouldn't have happened, they will never see. And so we talked about it. They since do not do it. I hope they still aren't doing it. I hope that we didn't leave the school and they went back to it.
They're like, okay, now we got rid of that Negro.
Yeah, and it was interesting because this woman had, we talked about her racial history, like, because we all have a racial history. Even if you're white, we all have, you know, what you heard as a child or what you never heard as a child.
Right.
That is your racial narrative. And if you heard as a kid that this part of town wasn't safe and you knew that all Black people lived over there, that's your racial narrative.
Ooh.
And that's something that you're going to have to undo. And if you heard that certain food was exotic, or certain TV shows were crass and not good, I often tell people that it's really hard for African Americans and the whole Black diaspora to tell our stories with a PG rating.
To the men, because it wasn't a PG experience. It's not PG.
It's not. It's a very explicit experience, and so
it's really X rated.
And so we have a lot of Christians that if it's not a PG or a G rating,
they won't go to
then
see it.
they won't see it
or support it.
So the story that they get from Harriet, and I love the movie Harriet, but the story that they get from Harriet is a story of valor and courage, and it's a love story. It's triumph. But what they don't get is attempted rape, being called nigger, they don't get all the other
being
things.
Physically beaten to the point that you have these fallouts for the rest of your life.
Right. And the same thing with
well, that's why Christian
the movie
stories
Just Mercy is a great movie. I love that movie. I love the book. I think everyone should see, and I do think you should see Harriet. Beautiful movie. But I also think you need to see Do the Right Thing. And I think you need to see Black Klansman. And I think you need to see a whole bunch of other things that are R-rated. Because we can't expect that everyone's going to hold our Christian sensitivities in hand for us to hear their stories. And when people challenge me on that, they're like, well, as Christians, I'm like, Jesus was at that table with people who were considered vile, and he listened to their stories,
and he held space with them. While he listened to their story, he didn't make them think that they needed to truncate said story or to change said story. He was there fully, and matter of fact, he let them know there's parts of your story you ain't sharing, and I already know it.
And
I'm still good.
he had a very rated R experience.
For real.
With the woman, the prostitute who washes her tears from his feet.
Yeah.
And he didn't stop her and say, you're inappropriate. So I think we need to stop censoring our stories so that we can understand how to engage in this history. And the same thing with that history teacher. Excellent history teacher on every other front, except her experience was this. She grew up in Selma. So she had the Selma narrative. She grew up during that time of racial integration that was being fought so hard against, right? So she wanted to make sure that her students didn't turn out to be the racists that she had in her family. And because she had to figure out how it's possible to believe that slavery was okay. She thought that her students needed to do this work. But because that was the only narrative she was teaching from.
That's to your point earlier. You said you have to assume everybody who is taking this in is an anti-racist. Has not been raised that point that they're arguing for is a point that they have been raised to believe is truth.
Right. And so it just And I think we spend a lot of time on slavery in schools. I wish we spent a lot more time with misogyny, because I think it is more of a telling story. The fact that we for a much longer period of our history made it illegal for Black people to marry white people, to marry outside your race.
No.
That's a part of slavery that lingered so much longer. And if you're a white parent with a child who is Black, you may have experienced people who are against race mixing.
Oh, I'm married to a white man.
Me too.
And that's what his family all argued, right?
Yeah. So when you so a lot of things that you're when you have that family member who says, yeah, but you're going to raise this Black child, what about dating? How are they going to date someone? You know, or you're raising this Black child. What if your son falls in love with her or him, you know? Or what if your daughter falls in love
with their brother or their sister?
Exactly.
Right.
So like you have
it's just as complicated, and it would be crazy.
And that's because of that long narrative that basically there was something wrong with Black people, and that we shouldn't be mixing with them, and we shouldn't be living with them, and we shouldn't be embracing them as family. And how does that even look like? And what in the world is that going to be like?
I read something that you were writing on the fact that they truly were taught that we were something other than human.
Other than human.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I was saying to my husband this morning, I'm often perplexed about how hard, and when people talk about founding fathers, I don't like to call them my founding fathers.
Agreed.
I prefer makers of our democracy, writers of the Constitution, because first, found what? It was here and it belonged to someone else. So they didn't find anything.
Right.
And secondly, father, none of those men were my father.
And I want to be.
Can't do it.
You know what? I can't wait. Go on. I have a part.
When I think of the writers of the Constitution and everyone who was in that room, I don't think people understand how much mental gymnastics they went through.
Oh my God.
To be able to say that we the people did not include women, people without land, and Black people, enslaved people. They went through a lot. They did scientific research. They went through a lot. They read journals about the size of skulls and all the different reasons why they absolutely bore the responsibility of slavery. Not even that they needed it. Some of them were like, well, we bear the responsibility of civilizing these people. And the way that we civilize them is we enslave them and we force them to be less than human so that they can be human, so that their souls can be saved. And I think that when people think about that, and someone just mentioned First Nations. Exactly. They had to do so much work.
I know.
Think about it. When's the last time you killed someone?
You're actually about to get on my point.
To do that. It took a lot for them. They really had to decide that Native people were a danger to themselves and a danger to humanity. Not just that they wanted the land. It was that it's our responsibility.
But do you see why? Because if it is your responsibility, yet you remain noble. Yet you remain noble. And in your executions.
Right. And they made it a divine responsibility.
Right.
And they hired, there was scientists involved in studies. And it goes way back before 76. This was happening in Europe and we carried it over to the States. And I mean, we carried it to Haiti. We carried it to everywhere that there was a port that could be where they could dock.
That's right.
And they saw thriving communities if those thriving communities did not look like a European Versailles, right?
Yeah.
If it didn't look like Parliament, if it didn't look that way, they deemed it savage, ungodly, unholy, and therefore needing to be tamed. And because I am white, it is my divine responsibility to have to do it. And
I can remain noble, because nobody's story does anyone want to be the villain in their story.
Right,
You
right.
have to make yourself the hero for self-preservation purposes, and we can get into that another time. But you have to be the hero. So even if I do evil, I must enact evil in a way that yet preserves my nobility, that I am an honorable person. And so the way that I'm able to do that is God has ordained me to do this kindness to these savage people. And I hope to help them.
Right. And I think also we have to, something that Ibram Kendi says often, and I love it, is so often white people vote against themselves.
Oh, my word.
They cast votes against themselves. And so what they also did is that when they first came over, it wasn't just African people who were slaves. There were also white slaves.
Absolutely.
Right? And then when they realized that the poor white people were working with the enslaved black people to have equality, they gave them the equality of being white without having to give up that land to them.
Right.
And so
because the whiteness the whiteness was a cachet. It had value.
Exactly. So they traded them. They're like, okay, we can't let you be a plantation owner too. And you can't also have a mansion, but you can have this white skin, and that will protect you and give you certain rights.
Right.
And so.
And it's pretty salient. People will see it off the get-go.
And we still are there. We still are there. There's still, like, when people are just like, well, how can all these people, insurrectionists, go to the Capitol and do this? Well, first of all, everyone wants to believe that the people carrying those flags and storming and breaking, that they were all working class poor folk.
No, they weren't.
First of all, they weren't. They don't have.
Some people took private jets.
The ones who are poor are actual, they're working.
Yeah.
They're working during this pandemic. They can't take off.
You saw that one lady who took the private jet?
Yes. So we have wealthy people
who feel this way,
who go this route, and they know that they have the base of poor white people who want to remain white.
Yes.
They want to remain white. They want to be told that there won't be affirmative action, or there won't be special handouts for black people or people of color or people from other countries, right? Coming into the States. They want to know that they get theirs first.
Right.
And if they get theirs first, then everyone else can have what's left over.
And
but what they realize,
them getting theirs first is the real place to give it. Somehow them being able to access and get theirs first is not perceived by them as special treatment. That's actually how it's supposed to be.
That's how it's supposed to be.
And only when there's a question of whether or not we should give these people theirs first just because they're white, then there's this clenching and holding and of not wanting to release. And I'm like, you can't not have white privilege and hold on to it at the same time. You can't say white privilege doesn't exist, but you own it and you cling to it, and you're mad at any like picture of it not being the thing. You can't.
Right. You can't. And also, we have to think about that when we talk about equality. Whose equality are we wanting?
Ooh.
To be equal to who? That's a real question. So when we say,
ooh,
I'm for equality, equal to who? Who do we need? Who has the power in which we are hoping to be equal?
So tell me, give me the answer. Who do we?
Well, it depends on the group. It depends on the group.
Here in the United States of America.
But in the United States of America, it is white male privilege.
That's exactly right. That's what I wanted to hear you say.
White male landowning privilege. It still exists. So
Yeah.
if you're a white man of a certain educational, and you don't even have to have the educational background, because you don't even have to be an educated person. We had a president who was not educated.
Yeah.
He held a degree, but that does not mean he wasn't educated and learned.
Reading was a challenge for him, and that doesn't mean one can't learn to read, but it was a challenge.
And that's a fact, y'all. They had to make charts for meetings because he would not read the daily briefs. So when we have that, and and let me just be clear, I think that that's fine.
That's what I'm saying. It's not. I'm not making fun of people who can't read.
That you have to be a learned person to have value, but that's the equality that's written into the Constitution that we all are saying we need to be equal to. Right. We have never thought that. We've never questioned our want of equality and who is doling it out. Right. And I think that we need to question that. We need to question equal to who, because if do we want equal? We already have equal humanity. That's a God-given thing. That's divinely given and can't be taken away. Sure. But we have to be specific, and that's something that Dr. King realized, that he couldn't just say we want to be equal. He had to say we want equal voting rights.
Very specific.
We want equal access to health care. We want equal
to jobs.
Access to jobs. We want equal schools.
That's right.
You know, because integration didn't equalize the schools.
That's right. Because Plessy versus Ferguson said that's separate,
but equal.
But equal.
Yeah.
And then only did the next case come and say separate is inherently unequal.
Right. And so what we're talking about with equality is it needs to be very specific. Yeah. And otherwise we'll get nothing done. So we can talk about being anti-racist. We can talk about Black Lives Mattering, but until we say we want equal healthcare. We want everyone to have equal rights in healthcare, equal access. And when I say it, that doesn't mean that I think that everyone, and what they did when King said we want equal voting rights, we want equal access to jobs, because the March on Washington was about jobs too. It wasn't just about civil rights. And then he was talking about civil rights for in a large bubble, not just this one specific thing. But when we get that and we don't, and we call people, well, if you want that, you're communist or you're socialist or you're this or you're that. No one is saying that we want everyone to be, to live the same exact life, right? We want everyone's flame to be at the same level. Everyone's wick to be trimmed the same level. No one.
But what you're saying is we don't want groups of people to be yoked around the neck and held back from.
We're just saying we want everybody to have a candle to light.
Just a chance.
That's all we're saying. We just want everyone to have a candle that can be lit. Right now, not everyone even has the candle. So
you said something earlier, and I am enthralled with this conversation. I love your mind. I love how you process information. I love how you espouse it. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. And I'm so thankful for it. And I'm proud of it. But one thing that you said, and you said, I feel we talk only about slavery, in school. I feel like we need to have a conversation that's larger than just slavery. I think we need to have a conversation, that I think we need to focus more on misogyny. Like, the fact that it was illegal to marry someone outside of your race. You know what I also feel like we need to focus on? I feel like we need to focus on what it takes to enact the type of evilness that keeps people separated. What that costs the soul to do that.
It's a high price.
It's a high price. It's like years ago, I had a friend who was in the military, and he was saying that there was a book that he read, and it was called On Kill or Kill On or something. But and I haven't read it, but he told me the concept. The concept of it was, look, we have these men and women who are going into battle for us, and we're like, yay, freedom, freedom. But no one is stopping to say, what does it cost a soul to kill? Because we are primed to protect. That's why a stranger will run out and try to protect that little kid from being hit from a car, unless they're a sociopath or something like that. But that's why we do stuff like that, because our instinct is to protect, to care, and to keep life alive.
Right.
So now, isn't it a powerful analysis to go, what does it, you talk about gymnastics, what kind of gymnastics does it take to be the type of soul that can do that and then have your cup of coffee tomorrow morning as if nothing happened? To me, I would love to see greater discourse, because I'm like, we are raising fractured human beings if you can do that kind of stuff and go about your day. You can get on that plane to go, a private airplane, go to the Capitol, feces are smeared over this building. It is broken into, and we don't talk enough about the officer who was murdered at the hands of these people.
Right.
And then you get back into the airport and try to go back home to Kentucky or DC or wherever. This is something that should make us all pause and go, what are we raising? Good googly moogly, Jesus.
Yeah. I think, and I don't have there's a really good book called Disunity in Christ by Christina Cleveland, who has a doctorate in social psychology. I think that's what her degree is in. And it's all about the practice of us versus them, they and them, we and they, and what that looks like in the church. And it's all based on actual studies that have been done and different scenarios that they would set up, and they would study how people will react. Like if they're told that they are the up group, and if someone's told that they're the lesser group, like how do people react, and how they calculate that. And I think we talk a lot about unity. And also, so there's that book. Keep that in mind, this unity in Christ. And then you have people talking about unity. But the first step in unity is first to see the they and see the them. And you can't just jump to unity without this seeing acknowledgement. That won't work. So how we get there is that we really have to, we don't even realize how many walls we have up in our everyday living. So my husband and I and my daughter, we just recently moved back to Chicago. And we had lived in Austin, and I have always lived in all white communities, predominantly white communities, except in the summers. I would go spend time with my mom, because I was raised by my grandparents, and we'd go for weekends in the summer to my mom's all black neighborhood.
Where's your mom?
In Cleveland. She's passed on since, but was in Cleveland. So, and Cleveland's a very segregated city, as most are. But in both of the towns that we lived in were working class. So we had this working class black community that loved and cared for us, and we had this working class white community in which we were a black family in it. One of very few. So but I've lived within those walls in every community that I've ever lived in. And so I have not seen a community yet that is this neighbor's from Nigeria, that neighbor's from India, this neighbor's from is African American, that neighbor's white, and that one's poor, and that one's wealthy, and she's a teacher, and that one stays home, but this one, we don't live how we actually vote and are
Yeah.
Like we vote, when we go to the polls, such a huge mix of people are arriving there, right?
Right.
You have rich, poor, educated, uneducated,
Oh my God, I see
working
it.
class, professionals. So we have
New to
this
the country, been here
new
since the
to the country,
Mayflower.
been
Yeah.
it, right. So we have all this difference happening at the polls, right? And that's why the polls are so scary for
For
so much of a great deal of
whiteness.
America,
Yeah.
white America. It's very
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
That's something that they can't control.
It's like going to the DMV.
Exactly.
The
But
playing field is
exactly.
level at the DMV. You
Right.
waiting in that line to get your driver's
Exactly.
license. Yeah.
But our neighborhoods don't look like that.
Right.
Our schools don't look like that.
Our
And
friends
so
don't look like that.
our what?
Our friends don't look
Our
like
friends
that. Our
don't look like
social
that.
worlds do not
Our
look like that. Yeah.
schools don't look like that. Our colleges don't look like that.
Mhm.
And so so the ideal of unity, I believe unity is too lofty a goal. I think it's too ethereal.
Ugh.
I think it's we have to act in a unified manner, but to say that we're unified and we have unity, I think is way too big. I think it would be more smart to say,
yeah,
let's think in have a unified mindset. Let's think about what it would look like if my neighbor didn't look exactly like me, and my pastor didn't look exactly like me, and my doctor didn't look exactly like me. What would my decisions be in life? If one of the things that keeps me really grounded, quite honestly, is that I have family members that race hits differently. My race hits my sisters differently than has hit me.
How does it hit them versus you?
Well, for one, growing up, it was different. My sisters were lighter skin, so I had darker skin and it hit differently. Then I went off to college, and then I married a white man. And so there are things that there are rooms that I've been invited into that my sisters wouldn't even want to be invited into.
I know.
Quite frankly. And I remember
so
my sister and I used to love watching 90210. And I remember this one time, I don't know if she's still listening, but it cracked me up. I was like talking about how, wouldn't it be so great to like
go to the school
and live with, and she looked at me like, what?
Ain't nobody want to go to Beverly Hills 90210.
And it's so funny because it was just a different, and I don't know if it was because I feel like my family sheltered me a little bit. My sisters and my sisters babied me. I'm not ashamed to say that they still do, but they my family, I always felt cherished by my siblings, like very cherished, and they were all older than me.
Your family did you right with that particular feeling of feeling cherished. So then when you went into the world and the world didn't cherish you, who cares? Because you were cherished.
Right. And they allowed me to be my strange self. So like I would come home and be like, my sisters we love music in my family. I coming home and going, you have to listen to this band REM, and my sisters are like, no, we don't.
No. You're like, no, the Depeche Mode is where it's at.
And so my sisters, but what I'm saying is that I know what my sister went through to get the job that she has today, and it's going to make me emotional. And I know the value of her. I know that she has wisdom that I don't have. And it doesn't matter that I went to college and she didn't go to college. She has leadership skills that I don't have. She has ideas that she can bring together things that I can't bring together. You know?
Yeah.
And I understand, I see that diversity, and I know what it took for them to raise their children. And I know the shelter that I enjoyed raising mine, making choices to raise her. I know I've had two sisters who have lost children. And so when I write, and I know that I can't allow certain racism that maybe doesn't hit me as hard to exist in my feed, because I have sisters out there and my brother and family that this hits differently. I have sisters, I have nephews who are essential workers, you know? So I can't afford to
act like it doesn't exist.
To act like that doesn't exist, because I live in a certain price range of life.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, their hurts are mine.
Amen.
Their hurts are mine. And so, and I have to assume that nothing's guaranteed. And I have to assume that nothing's guaranteed for my daughter. And I'm having all these conversations because I'm praying to God every single day that I'll have one more conversation so that my daughter will have one less conversation that she'll have to have.
Oh my God.
I will talk about the hair. I will talk about the lotion. I will talk about the slavery, if that means that my daughter may not have to have that conversation with someone.
Right.
And my little great nieces and nephews may not have that conversation with someone. I will talk it until I'm blue in the face, if that's what it takes, so that
you remind me of Serena Williams right now.
Kid has to, I don't have to get another letter from a mom saying, oh my gosh, how do I help my son sit through this class where they're going to be using the N-word constantly, right?
It's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable.
Yeah. So
you're willing to have the repeated, the sometimes senseless, harsh, conversations with the hopes that it will provide enough light and truth that maybe that which ensues from you, your children, your children's children, your nieces, nephews, your progeny that comes through many different avenues, they may not have to have those conversations.
Exactly.
Maybe a different conversation, but it won't be these basic conversations that just allow
about their worth
to enter the room.
Right, about their worth. So when I think of unity, I'm not talking about a unity that's actually literal and you have to move your neighborhood. If you're able to do that, we did that, and let me tell you, I'm loving where we live now, because when I walk by a house that's a mansion and I don't know who lives in it, it's not a given that that's a white person in there.
Amen.
It is a beautiful thing. Yeah. And I don't know who lives in the projects. It's a beautiful thing.
It is.
Because I can't assume in this neighborhood. This neighborhood, I live in Hyde Park, and it's so diverse. Socially, economically diverse. It's racially diverse. It's diverse in sexual identity. It's a very diverse neighborhood. And there are so many different faces with different stories. Like, I was talking to a woman about our dogs. She was a judge. This Black woman was a judge who also on the side wrote children's books about her dog. Have mercy. I would have never had that in Austin.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that even if you are in Austin or you're in a place where there's not that going on, you can think in a unified manner. You can think with a unified mind, a mind that is, what if the decision that I'm making about this school decision on the PTA isn't just about my child, but the least of these, the child that doesn't get to have a school, that has to have a school lunch even on the weekend. You know what I mean? They need that school lunch. Like, what does that look like? How will I vote if that's how I'm voting.
Right.
I've often thought, and this is just a silly thought, but I've often thought, man, if I were white, I would just want to do the dang thing just so we could stop talking about it.
Right.
I mean, like would you just want to, don't you just want to be done with it? I would just be like, please, let's give them their rights.
Let's just
open
see
up
people
the
as
vote.
humans. Right.
Let's make sure that people have what they need so I don't have to hear about it anymore.
And
I would be like that judge in the Bible, the woman that kept coming wanting her justice. I would be like, I don't even care about what you care about, but I just want you to have your justice so I don't have to hear about it anymore.
Because you don't keep knocking on my door.
Yeah, I'm just like, but for some reason, I'm just like, this isn't going to go away. People aren't going to just, in the same way that slaves weren't just like, you know what, it's good. Right. I'll just sit here and plow this field.
Yeah, like, very peaceful. Very peaceful. No, it was not peaceful. That's what I'm trying to say.
They were revolting all the time.
Every day.
And they were, the enslavers were freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, these people are revolting all the time. How do we stop them?
Right. That's what I'm trying to talk about. I want that's exactly
Black Lives Matter protests to end.
Yeah. Stop oppressing them.
Stop oppressing Black people.
That's it.
It's real simple. It's stop
very
oppressing
simple.
Black people. Make sure, ask them, okay, what do you need? What do we need to do so that Black Lives Matter? Do the thing.
Instead of trying to prove to you that you don't need to say Black Lives Matter. I'm like, how about this? Even if racism wasn't an issue, which we know that's a lie. Why? This is my challenge to the white Christians. Why wouldn't it be a good thing to dig in and to value and to espouse the value of a particular group of people that are a part of your family? Why wouldn't it be all right? It's like, even if Auntie, Michelle was, she already is super smart, but there's a perception that she may not think that. Why would it be a bad thing? Even if she's already brilliant, why wouldn't it be a bad thing to tout her brilliance? I just don't get it.
It's so weird. I think it's, we're bad at marriage, and if I think about the marriage that we have to our democracy, it doesn't surprise me that we're bad at this,
right?
Because so often, and we've all, if you're in a partnership, we've been there where you have to gauge, like, is what they're saying true? I know they say they feel this way, but I'm feeling some kind of way about the way that they're saying that they're feeling.
Yeah, like my husband not picking up his stuff and putting them in the dirty clothes, or washing clothes in our family.
Right, and so we have to get to this point. You get to this point where, even in your partnerships, you're thinking, do I really still want to argue about the dang thing, or do I just want to hear them, listen, and figure it out?
That's what I'm saying. Why is that a bad thing?
Why is that such a bad thing? And it's really, again, just having that unified mindset, a mindset that unifies even when your living is very homogenous. That when you're walking into grocery stores, that you're thinking, and all the people are in there, and you're thinking about how to treat and how to shop. Like, you're thinking in a unified manner, even though you have privilege and you live in homogeny. It's that thing. But what often happens, and I've sat with women, and I used to be on different prayer teams, and most of them were white dominant.
And that's a scary situation. I can tell you right now, when you just said that, I'm like,
it's difficult.
I'm scared.
There's a lot of praying to protect whiteness, and people don't understand it. It's the prayers that my child gets into the right schools. It's the prayers that my kid's salvation somehow isn't bothered by some sort of stress or challenge. And that really would get me. I'm just like, I hope your kid gets challenged. Right. Walk.
I once went to church with a young, when we had a youth, and one of the guys at the church, his prayer was that he didn't want his wife, she worked in a professional, we were in our 20s or 30s, and he didn't want he didn't want his wife to work where she was because there were gay people there, and it was just not a good environment for her. It was an environment that was destructive for her. And I was like, what is it? Is that?
Yeah.
I
Unless we're serving, which don't get me it started, but unless we're serving,
oh gosh,
then that's a great environment for us. If we're
right.
serving, if we're on a in a hospice on an AIDS ward for
a whole bunch of gay people who are dying,
they're dying.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's great for our souls.
That's right.
But what if you could be in a situation where you're being served by their thriving? What about that? And so I think just the idea that we would be so censored in our spirituality, just really censored. And so I call it white preservation. Like
it is.
We are so intent on preserving white excellence, preserving it in the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
That to me is it's just heartbreaking, because I'm just like, if you're praying for your child, it's kind of like Dory. Dory says it in
Finding Nemo.
in Finding Nemo. She says, well, you don't want nothing to ever happen to little Nemo, because if nothing ever happens to him, then nothing ever happens to him. Right. And I think that's so true of how we parent as Christians. We parent from this fear-based assumption that our kid can't have a moment's doubt, can't have a moment's questioning, can't have any sort of interaction with anyone outside of their own frame of mind. And we pray for it. And so I would sit in these prayer meetings that all it was praying that the walls stayed up.
That they stayed
and
preserved.
That they were thick and impenetrable. And
you
it's like,
go ahead.
And it's just,
it's a weakened space. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really is you're really truly moving from a weakened position. Hear me when I say this. If I am truly trained to make assumptions in the positive about you predicated upon your complexion, right? If it's white, and my level of comfort, my level of ease, if I am truly taught, like, that's who I trust, that who I trust, who the good guy is, looks like that. And I am also concurrently taught that who the bad guy is looks like me.
Oh yeah.
I'm sitting in a weakened position, because that means I might bring people into my fold, into my space, that are not trustworthy.
Right.
And I might exclude others who actually I would have benefited greatly of them being in my space, but I have made them untrustworthy. So I feel like then I often say, when we sit in the seat of awareness, we sit in the seat of power, because when you are aware, you can address. So for me, that position automatically puts that person in unawareness. They're unaware. So they can truly have something that's dangerous and bad for them. But they don't see it as dangerous and bad because it's wearing the right color skin. They can truly have something that will be the savior for them in a situation, that will buttress them and support them in ways that they couldn't even fathom or beg or ask or request.
Right.
But it's excluded because of the skin.
Because of the skin, or their sexual identity.
Or their sexual identity. Or their religion.
Or their language, or their religion.
I'm like,
or, it's, so what we've done as a church is and I mean big C church, is we have told our children, we have made our children only see certain environments as safe. Right. And anything outside of that environment is not normal, it's not safe, it's not Christian, it's not holy. And so what happens is then our kid, we make sure that they go to a college that preserves them. We make sure that they live in a neighborhood that preserves them. And the only time that they are outside of that is when they're on a mission trip.
And when they're going to save somebody. Mm-hmm.
When they're going to save somebody. And so we perpetuate the same evils of the writers of the Constitution who felt that the work of slavery was missionary.
Yeah.
That it was a mission from God.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be very careful about how we're sending our children out to do missions and why we're doing it. And if that is the only worldview that your children have of people of color, of people who are of a different sexual identity, of people who are poor, is that they need their mission is to save them and to help them,
and not to be helped,
and not the other way around.
Right. I mean,
then that's really, really troubling.
It is troubling
because
and it's very it's very truncating. It's very like limited. It cuts them off. I mean, and then also you think about this, we will then make these children possibly go against.
Oh, you broke up. Okay.
Fear.
Yeah.
Sorry, we will make children ignore. This could lead to children ignoring those inherent like leadings and promptings because it's so covered by the things that we told them are socially right.
Right. And also it silences their curiosity. So
oh my gosh,
when a child sees, for example, a transsexual person, and as children are very curious, and we turn their eyes as if they're seeing some sort of evil presence in a human being, we are stifling their curiosity. We're stifling their curiosity about the nature of the Imago Dei and all things, all humans.
That's right.
And we end up giving them a narrative that God can only shine in certain bodies.
Oh my God.
That light is only valuable in certain bodies.
Yeah.
And in any other body, it is a tool of the enemy, which is really sad and a very, very blasphemous thing to believe, because that is saying that Satan has the enemy, darkness, and has the power to create as God does. And if we believe that, then we can continue to separate us versus them. And what we're doing is we are segregating the Imago Dei. We are literally segregating the Imago Dei, and we are only looking at an eyeball of God, or we're only looking at a small part of God's shoulder. We're only looking at a fingernail. We're not looking at the whole beauty of humanity, whether that person is a believer or not.
That's right.
Whether that person's Muslim, an atheist, all of this is a picture of God. And we can't, and if you say that you're pro-life, you can't say that, well, but they're not Christian, so they can't be, God's not in them. Well, then why are you so bothered about what happens to them or how, or pro-life? If they're, what life are you being pro for?
Right.
Are you only being pro the life that's going to become an evangelical, Episcopalian, Catholic, whatever? Are you not pro? I mean, once that life is born,
are you pro Rashid or Rahim or Radio
and
Rahim?
Once that life is born, is it somehow not valuable?
I mean, I think we do see that though. That's in fact how
only valuable in the womb.
Yeah,
but once it's out of the womb,
we're gonna talk about how lazy you are and how much if you had a job, we shouldn't have to help you.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. So I just really hope that we can get to a point as Christians where we aren't so fragile in our faith. Because honestly, what does it cost you to watch a movie that no one's taking your salvation away from you? No one's saying you can't read your Bible and watch a Spike Lee film. I mean, it's ludicrous. I mean, no one's.
Oh my gosh.
I'm just like, how are you going to know? It's like, I watched all of Pose, which is fictional, but it's a story of.
What is it called?
It's called Pose. It's by Billy Porter, and it's about
Billy Porter.
Transsexual community during the crisis of AIDS. So it's in the 80s. And my daughter and I watched it, and I wept. We wept all the way through it because there's just so much that we didn't know. And you know why we didn't know? I don't know anyone who's transsexual, and how am I gonna know unless I watch?
Right.
Unless I'm willing
Speak
to
it
hear
out.
their stories.
Right.
Not told through somebody who's never been there, by the way.
Or but, who has an agenda to tell you how bad it is.
Right. But and that's so much of the story of transsexual people is that they are the villains in the movie. They're the evil ones.
Right.
But when was the last time that you had a conversation with? I don't have that ability, right? And it's not their job. It's not their job for me to go find them and be like, now tell me everything about it and tell me how I know.
Or for me to ask them questions,
right?
Openly ready to refute everything they say, because what I want them to know is that who they are is wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we also watched this other, I can't think of it, but this other show on Netflix about a guy, and who's a dance teacher in Texas. And I mean, it's a whole mood because he's in Mesquite, Texas, living his best full gay life, right? And wearing, and it is intoxicating. But one of the things is that when he has this confrontation with his sister, who had texted him or wrote him a letter telling him that he was an abomination. And when they sat face to face, one of the things that he asked his sister, they talked about their childhood, they talked about the highs and the lows, they talked about her journey, and then he asked, when you said that, I was heartbroken. Do you really think I'm an abomination?
Sorry.
And surprise, surprise, that woman couldn't look in her beautiful brother's face and say that. She couldn't do it.
Because
she said,
it's hard to hate up close.
Right. And she said, of course not. Of course not. I love you. Huh?
I mean them, not you.
Yeah.
All the other thems.
Yeah. And so, and then she has this whole, they start mending their relationship. She starts meeting people who are in his life. And I just think the same can be true for race, but it's a lot harder because for some reason we think race is, I don't know. We think that race is something that is, when you choose blackness, that you're not choosing whiteness. You're not as valid, and that's just really sad. We still believe in assimilation more so than we believe in blackness. We believe that Black people need to be a certain way in order to be heard.
Yeah, and I felt that. I felt that deeply. I felt that I needed to, because I navigated largely white spaces, and I felt like I needed to show up and make them feel comfortable.
Make them feel comfortable.
Make them like me. And 3, be excellent in that space. Be better than good. Be better than best.
Right.
That's
and I think, and I grew up like that too, but I have these sisters who did not buy into that. And
Yeah,
I
I did
love
not.
that about my sisters. They did not buy into that. And my sisters are so fully themselves all the time. When my daughter hears my sister's voice when I'm talking to her on the phone, she flies out of her bedroom. My daughter's 18. You know, they like to be in their space.
Right.
But she shows up because the authentic nature of my sisters, the lushness of them, of the way that they speak, of the way that they carry themselves, of just the way that they hold space, and they're cheering her on, right?
Yeah.
They're genuine cheering her on, and however she's going to show up. One of my sister's favorite things that she'll say, well, that ain't for me, but girl, you go ahead. That's not for me, but I'm a support you in that. So I'm just like, I wish that Christians did that more. I wish that all Christians were like that we were just like, girl, that is not for me, but I am going to support you in that. And
You do you.
Love you.
You do you.
That is fascinating. You. That is not for me.
Right.
But so often what happens is what a Christian will do is say, that is not for me and you need to stop it.
And let me tell you why it shouldn't be for you.
Right. Let me tell you all the reasons you need to
oh my God,
not do this.
Oh my gosh, I could be here with you, Marcie, all day long. I have got to jump on another call that I've been like, I just can't do that because I just wanted to keep talking to you. But I want to ask a few quick questions just on the way.
Rapid fire. Okay.
My rapid fire questions. What sound or noise do you love?
I really love my daughter's laugh. It sounds cheesy.
No, I've heard
but
that.
She has the goofiest laugh, and she's super cool. Like if you see her feed, Nadia Jordy, she's super cool. But when she laughs, she's not, and
she's
it's genuine. Yeah,
I love that. What sound or noise don't you love?
What about?
Oh,
I hate the sound of that. I hate any time I hear it. What about? What about?
Haven't thought about this. Here's another reason why you should hate these people. Essentially,
I hate the sound of that, and I hate the sound of a child in distress.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What is your favorite English word?
Brilliant.
I love it. What is your favorite English curse word?
Oh gosh, so many. I'm gonna say, oh gosh, but that's not really a curse. I would say the F word when I'm extremely upset.
Yeah, that's a curse. That's downright good. That's a good one. Yes.
Yeah.
Wine or whiskey?
Oh, that's impossible. That depends. Oh, it depends. I'm going to say, I really like whiskey. We've been really enjoying it during this pandemic. I'm going to say wine. I'm going to say wine.
Red or white?
I do like a rosé.
I like that. I
do. Like a true rosé. I don't mean like someone mixed some red wine with some white wine.
Right. Yeah. I get it. Real rosé. They're refreshing. Marcie, if heaven exists, what do you want God to say when you get there?
Welcome. That's all.
That is so beautiful. I cannot tell you how grateful I am that you spent time with me, that you had this wonderful, deeply authentic conversation. The banter was mind-blowing for me. It touched my soul so deeply. I could cry right now. And I just want you to know that I appreciate everything you're putting out into this world. It is a big, big world out there. And a lot of the stuff that you are putting out, we all desperately need. And anyone who is on this path knows how much bravery one must call up, how much one must be surrounded by people who love them and cherish them and know that they are fantastic. Because I know that there have to be arrows that come your way. And I want you to know that, sister, when an arrow comes to you, it comes to me. And I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you too. This was very life-giving. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcie. I'm going to send you my number and I'll get yours after this.
Okay.
And it will be saved and I will post it.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care, y'all. Bye.